The first sign was often not the shot. It was the silence after. A hedgerow that had been alive with insects would go still. A window that had reflected morning light turned black, like an eye closing. The air itself seemed to thicken, to hold its breath in anticipation of what was coming. Then a man would fall, not dramatically, not with a cry, but as if something inside him had simply been turned off. His companions would freeze, their eyes scanning horizons that revealed nothing. By the time anyone understood what had happened, the one who fired was already dead in all the ways that mattered. He just didn't know it yet. On the Eastern Front, men said a spotted sniper had the life expectancy of a flare in the dark. In Normandy, American infantry joked without humor that a German sharpshooter who revealed himself had already mailed his last letter. It was not bravado, it was arithmetic, cold and unyielding. Once seen, once fixed in space by a muzzle flash, a glint of glass, the angle of a wound, the battlefield began to close in on him from every direction at once. The mathematics of modern war offered no appeals, no second chances. But snipers were trained to disappear, to become part of the ground. That was the theory. The ground had other ideas. The German army entered the Second World War with a deep respect for marksmanship, hunting culture, pre-war shooting clubs, and a military tradition that valued precision fire shaped their doctrine from the earliest days. The sniper was not an assassin in legend, but a tool, an extension of infantry firepower meant to unbalance the enemy's cohesion. He would eliminate officers, machine gun crews, radio operators, remove the nerves, the hands, the eyes, a rifle, a scope, patience. That was the promise offered by doctrine and training manuals. Geography complicated the promise. Russia's endless forests, shattered villages, and rubble fields did not behave like training ranges. Normandy's bocage, sunken lanes and walls of earth woven with ancient roots, absorbed sound and hid movement, but it also trapped anyone inside like a maze with no exits. Cities such as Stalingrad turned into vertical battlefields where every window was a possibility, and every possibility was a target waiting to be answered. German sniper training emphasized fieldcraft above all else. Camouflage with burlap and foliage, slow movement measured in inches rather than meters, choosing firing positions with both field of fire and concealment considered equally. The rifle, often a carabiner 98K fitted with a telescopic sight, was mechanically reliable, accurate at distance. Doctrine suggested two-man teams when possible, shooter and observer. One to fire, one to watch flanks, judge wind that's barely there, and most importantly, see what the shooter cannot. The world's reaction to violence delivered from hiding, because the world reacted violently. Infantry combat by 1942 had become a system of systems, interlocking and relentless. A single rifle shot no longer existed in isolation. Sound ranging, flash spotting, pre-registered artillery grids, radios down to platoon level, mortars carried like extra limbs. All of it meant that any revealed position could be turned into coordinates within moments. War was becoming mathematical, and mathematics was unforgiving to anything that held still for too long. A German sniper might crawl for hours to reach a church tower, a hayloft, a shell hole with a view down a road. He would measure distance not in meters but in breaths, each exhalation controlled and deliberate. He would wait for a shape that moved differently from the others, someone giving orders, someone scanning with binoculars, someone whose death would ripple outward through the enemy's organization. He would fire once, maybe twice. In training, that was success, mission accomplished. In reality, the first shot was an alarm that could not be unrung. On the Soviet side, entire counter-sniper doctrines evolved with brutal efficiency. Sniper schools trained hunters to hunt hunters, teaching patience and observation in equal measure. Artillery observers learned to triangulate from the direction of impact, calculating angles from wounds and dust. Infantry were taught to freeze, to watch dust puffs, broken twigs, the faint rectangle of a man-made shape against natural lines. A single German bullet could trigger a response involving mortars, machine guns, and other snipers all searching the same patch of earth with methodical intensity. The German marksman had accuracy. The enemy had mass and communication. Somewhere outside Rzhev, winter 1942, A young German Gefreiter pressed into a shallow depression in the snow, his white smock stiff with frost. The rifle felt heavier than it had in autumn, the cold seeping into metal and bone alike. Cold thickened the grease in the bolt, making each movement sluggish. He had been told to watch a gap between trees where a Soviet supply path crossed open ground. He saw movement, a figure hunched under a crate, breath visible in the frozen air. He exhaled, squeezed. The man dropped, the crate rolling, dark against white. For a moment, nothing. The world held its breath. Then the forest spoke. Machine guns stitched the tree line, not aimed but searching, probing. Branches exploded into splinters above him, showering him with frozen wood. Snow kicked up in a line that walked toward his position with mechanical precision. He tried not to move, pressing himself deeper into the frozen earth. Training said stillness was survival, but the second rule, less spoken, learned only through experience, was that stillness also made you a landmark for those who knew how to look. A Soviet sniper watching for the same path from a different angle had seen the flash, the faint disturbance in the perfect white. He did not rush. He waited for the German to shift, to breathe, to become human instead of landscape. It took 3 minutes. The German flexed his numb fingers, trying to restore circulation. That was enough. He felt the impact as a hammer blow, not pain, just force. And then the snow filled his mouth. Around him, the machine guns continued firing, unaware they were already late, punishing a position that no longer needed punishment. In Normandy, the pattern was different, but the outcome similar in its finality. Hedgerows broke sightlines into meters. A German sniper in camouflage smock could dominate a lane, a gap in a hedge, a farmhouse door for hours. American infantry learned quickly that every approach had eyes on it. The first man across a field often paid the tuition for those who followed. But American units carried radios like lifelines connecting them to devastating firepower. A shot would ring out, a soldier would drop. The platoon leader would shout coordinates rough and fast, voice tight with urgency. Within minutes, sometimes less, mortars would thump from behind the lines. High explosive would fall not precisely, but thoroughly, turning the hedgerow into churned soil and splintered roots. A sniper's strength was precision. The counter was indifference to precision, replaced by volume and saturation. A German Obergefreiter later recalled the sound of incoming mortars as doors slamming in the sky. He had fired twice from a loft in a stone barn. Good view, solid rest. The second shot hit a radio man, sending him sprawling. Then he saw something he had not expected. No panic. The Americans dragged the wounded back with practiced efficiency. Smoke began to drift across the field, and then the doors in the sky began to slam with increasing fury. He tried to leave after the first round struck. The stairwell was narrow. His rifle caught on a beam in his haste. Dust filled the air, turning light into something solid and choking. By the time he reached the yard, the barn was no longer a structure, but a suggestion of what had been. He ran along a wall that did not exist anymore and felt the earth lift him, set him down hard. He survived, but his hearing did not. His war became silent, except for the memory of the shots he had fired and the thunder that answered. Sniping was effective. That was the problem. Every successful shot forced the enemy to adapt, to saturate, to escalate their response. A hidden rifle could tie down a company, but it also drew the attention of weapons that did not care about one man or two. Flamethrowers were brought up to clear suspected positions in ruins. Tanks fired high explosive into upper floors without seeing targets, destroying possibility itself. Whole buildings were demolished to kill a chance, an angle, a shadow. In Stalingrad, both sides learned that a good firing position was also a coffin with a view. A German sniper might choose the third floor of a shattered apartment block overlooking a square. Perfect line of sight. Concealment in shadow. He might kill several Soviet soldiers trying to cross the exposed space. Then Soviet artillery would level the building, not surgically but comprehensively, floor by floor. Rubble did not distinguish between floors or the men hiding within them. A Soviet veteran described watching a German sniper's building collapse in slow motion, as if the city were shrugging off in irritation. "He was good," the veteran said. "That is why we killed the house." Training taught snipers to fire and move, to never stay in one position. Reality often denied movement. Mud sucked at elbows and knees with greedy persistence. Snow revealed tracks like signatures written for anyone to read. Urban rubble shifted under weight, sending small avalanches of brick that drew eyes from every direction. Even crawling away could be a signal flare to anyone already searching. German doctrine had not fully accounted for the density of firepower that modern war could bring to a single grid square. Artillery, mortars, aircraft, heavy machine guns, all could be directed by men who never saw the sniper, only the effect of his work and the direction of his bullets. The battlefield became a network where information traveled faster than any individual could escape. And there was the human factor. A sniper lay alone for hours, sometimes days. Hunger, thirst, cramps, the need to cough or urinate, all negotiated against the possibility of being seen. Fatigue made small mistakes inevitable, a shift of the rifle that caught the sun, a movement too fast for the surrounding wind, a moment of impatience born of exhaustion. On the other side, infantry developed a sixth sense for danger. They learned to read absence, a bird not landing where it should, a window that remained dark after shells burst nearby, the angle of a fallen body. Fear sharpened perception until it became almost supernatural. Every soldier had a stake in finding the hidden rifle. British units in Northwest Europe employed sniper bait tactics. Not men offered deliberately, but deliberate exposure of helmets on sticks. Movement meant to draw a shot and reveal a position. Once the sniper fired, the location could be narrowed to meters. Machine guns and artillery would follow. It was not personal. It was procedure, refined through bitter experience. The sniper, too, was not acting out of personal hatred. He was following orders, fulfilling a role that doctrine said mattered. He might believe he was saving his comrades by removing threats at distance. He might also know quietly that each shot was a flare marking his own position on a map he could not see. Letters from German snipers rarely spoke of glory. They spoke of waiting, of cold ground, of the strange intimacy of seeing faces at distance through magnifying glass, of the shock when the world answered back with overwhelming force. One wrote that after his first confirmed kills, he felt not triumph, but a sense of being watched by the earth itself. On the Soviet side, counter-snipers described a similar burden. To kill a sniper meant hours of stillness, eyes straining against fatigue, nerves stretched thin as wire. The moment of firing brought relief and dread together, because a second sniper might be watching them in turn. It was mirrors facing mirrors, reflections of men trying to outweight one another while larger weapons prepared to erase them both. Effectiveness carried a cost beyond the physical. A sniper who survived multiple engagements often carried a growing awareness that he was a priority target. Sleep thinned. Every sound in the rear area could feel like reprisal arriving late. Some were rotated out not for wounds, but for what commanders called nervous exhaustion. They had lived too long inside a crosshair, sometimes their own. By 1944 and 1945, the density of Allied firepower in the West and Soviet artillery in the East meant that any fixed point of resistance was temporary. The battlefield rewarded mobility, dispersion, and rapid communication. The lone specialist who needed time and stillness operated at a disadvantage unless perfectly concealed, and perfection rarely survived contact with mud, weather, and chance. So the pattern repeated: a shot, a man down, silence. Then the net tightening: mortars, machine guns, tanks, counter-snipers, flamethrowers, demolition charges. The sniper might escape once, twice. Each time the margin narrowed. Eventually, a fragment, a bullet, a collapsing wall, or simple bad luck closed the account. After the war, some former snipers returned to civilian life with skills that had no peacetime equivalent. Hunting felt different. Looking through a scope at an animal, some would remember faces instead. Others refused to speak of it at all, not out of pride or shame, but because the experience did not translate into words that made sense outside mud and ruins. The myth of the sniper as untouchable ghost persisted in stories. The reality was statistical and impersonal. He was a highly trained component in a system that increasingly punished any component that revealed itself. His talent made him valuable. It also made him hunted with disproportionate effort. In quiet moments, veterans on all sides remembered not the shots, but the waiting. The weight of the rifle across forearms gone numb, the taste of cold air, the way time stretched thin enough to tear. They remembered the sudden violence that followed a single crack, and how quickly a patch of earth could become the center of the world's attention. Some survived by moving at the right second. Some survived by chance. Many did not survive the moment their skill became visible. In the end, the battlefield kept no record of who had been hunter and who had been hunted. Ruined buildings were cleared, forests regrew, fields were plowed again. But for those who had lain behind glass, measuring distance in heartbeats, the memory remained of how thin the line was between seeing and being seen. A sniper's war was built on invisibility. The moment it failed, the rest of the war, loud, heavy, indiscriminate, arrived all at once. And when it passed, it left behind a silence deeper than the one before the shot, filled with the knowledge that survival had often depended less on skill than on the simple mercy of not being noticed 1 second longer than the other man.